Hello everyone, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today we have come up with few important news articles. Those news articles are very important for your examination perspective. So before discussing all those important news articles, let's try to solve yesterday's given practice question. So the question was Kalam 250, which was in news recently, is related to which of the following things. So the correct answer for this question is C, that is rocket motor. Kalam 250 is a rocket motor. Now if you look at the explanation for this Kalam 250, we have seen recently that India's first private space agency, that is Skyroot Aerospace. So this Skyroot Aerospace has successfully conducted test firing of stage 2 propulsion system that is named as Kalam 250. So this stage 2 propulsion system, that is Kalam 250, is actually part of Vikram 1's space launch vehicle. So because of that reason, it is in news. Now if you look at the Kalam 250, so that is part of the stage 2 of Vikram 1 space vehicle, is crucial for propelling or guiding the launch vehicle from the atmosphere phase to the outer phase. So it is a high strength carbon composite rocket motor, so that uses the solid fuel. Okay, so if you look at today's practice question, the practice question for today is: recently Ministry of Home Affairs has extended the Armed Forces Powers Act, Special Powers Act. A few days back we have also discussed this, that Armed Forces Special Powers Act has extended to few districts in 2 different states. So the options are given here. Please answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer I will be giving you in tomorrow's class. So the first question, thing that we are discussing today is with respect to Enforcement Directorate. So recently the Supreme Court has said that Enforcement Directorate can summon anyone for any information. So this is with respect to recently Enforcement Directorate had issued summons to few district collectors in the state of Tamil Nadu. However, the district collectors in different districts of Tamil Nadu have not actually attended or given information to the Enforcement Directorate. So this was challenged in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has said that central agency, that is Enforcement Directorate, could call anybody for any information. So thereby Supreme Court now providing validity for the Enforcement Directorate and its powers. So this is why it is in news. Now we'll try to understand the powers and functions of the Enforcement Directorate. Now what are the powers and functions of the Enforcement Directorate? So Enforcement Directorate has powers of both search and seizure. Okay, so it can carry out search of a property, and at the same time it can also seize money or any documents, and this provide for the Enforcement Directorate is provided under section 16 and section 17 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So Prevention of Money Laundering Act was passed in the year 2002. So the purpose of Prevention of Money Laundering Act to combat or counter drug trafficking based money laundering. Okay, so this is the overall objective of Prevention of Money Laundering Act, right? So apart from this, in case if Enforcement Directorate arrests any person or any individual, then ED gets 6 days time. So ED would be provided 6 days of time to file a charge sheet, because any person cannot be convicted more than 7 years as per the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and its provisions. So because of that reason, Enforcement Directorate gets 60 days to file its charge sheet. So because of that reason, it also provides exceptional powers to the Enforcement Directorate. And followed by that, in case of any property is being attached by the enforcement directorate, because if enforcement directorate believed that the property is the result of the illegal proceeds of drug trafficked money, okay, so this is the result of money laundering, or any property which is the result of corruption, then enforcement directorate can attach that particular property also along with arresting an individual. However, if enforcement directorate only attaches a property, then it must provide a prosecution complaint along with the attachment order, and this attachment order and prosecution complaint must be submitted to the adjudicating authority within 60 days. So these are some powers and functions of the enforcement directorate. Now we will understand some other powers of ED with respect to interrogation and custody. Now if you look at the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, so this Prevention of Money Laundering Act was passed by India or Indian Parliament in the year 2002 on the recommendations of Financial Action Task Force. So the Financial Action Task Force has recommended that we have to constitute Prevention of Money Laundering Act to curb drug trafficking based money laundering. So because of that reason, we have constituted the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now the Enforcement Directorate had actually entrusted with the responsibility of executing the provisions under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And also remember, the Enforcement Directorate is not constituted under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Rather, the provisions of Prevention of Money Laundering Act are implemented by the or executed by the Enforcement Directorate, right? So therefore, it is responsible for conducting any investigation with respect to provisions under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and at the same time it could also trace the assets that are being derived from the proceeds of crime. These are the responsibilities of the Enforcement Directorate with respect to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So however, there are a lot of judgments from the Supreme Court with respect to the powers of the Enforcement Directorate. So one such important judgment from the Supreme Court is Vijay Madan Lal Chowdhury versus Union of India judgment. So in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court has actually upheld, okay, so please understand, the Supreme Court has upheld all the provisions under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So saying that the powers of arrest, attachment, search, seizure conferred upon the ED by the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So therefore, all the powers of Enforcement Directorate which are derived from the Prevention of Money Laundering Act are valid, and this is what the Supreme Court has said in Vijay Madan Lal Chowdhury versus Union of India case. Now please understand why Supreme Court has came to this particular conclusion. It is because the Supreme Court has an opinion that all provisions under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act are reasonable enough to achieve the objectives that are being achieved under the Act of Prevent Money Laundering. Okay, so the provisions under the Prevention of Money Laundering are reasonable enough to achieve the objectives, that is prevention of money laundering, and this is what the Supreme Court's opinion with respect to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So some details with respect to the Enforcement Directorate. So it is said that the Enforcement Directorate is a multidisciplinary organization or a multidisciplinary body, and Enforcement Directorate is mandated with enforcing two important or two special fiscal laws. So one law we all know that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and second law is Foreign Exchange Management Act 1919. So these two fiscal laws are enforced by the Enforcement Directorate. Secondly, also understand whenever any offense is registered in a local police station and the proceeds that are being generated by that particular crime is above 1 crore, then ED would step in. Okay, ED would start investigating that particular matter. Okay, so this is with respect to the Enforcement Directorate and Supreme Court's judgment, which has been authorizing the Enforcement Directorate and its powers with respect to implementation of Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now let's try to discuss the next important news article. So this is with respect to India's demographic dividend. The report says India is risking its demographic dividend. So there was a report that is published by the World Bank with the name Jobs for Resilience. So this report is not just talking about India, but it is also talking about the larger South Asia. So this particular report by World Bank has quoted that the demographic dividend utilization in South Asia in general and India in particular are focusing on, so they have not yet utilized the existing demographic dividend in an efficient manner. And this report has also focused on India's overall employment growth. So what are the major findings of the report? We will understand them. So first, demographic dividend is actually the total number of working age people in a population. Okay, the total number of workforce in a total population. So in order to have a healthy demographic dividend, we need to take care of the existing human capital. We need to skill them. Upskilling them, reskilling them is very important. Healthcare, education, policy support, innovation and infrastructure are essential elements which are part of the demographic dividend of any country. So in India, it is said that we have the largest number of people in the demographic dividend in the middle age of 28 years. So therefore, in this context, what are the major findings of the report and what are the major suggestions, we will understand. So firstly, the South Asia in general and India in particular are experiencing slow job creation. So employment is not created adequately across all categories of people. So that includes India also. And they have not able to leverage their existing demographic dividends also. Okay, so because of this reason, the job creation in these regions and job creation in India still lag behind. Okay, so lag behind the growth in working age population. Despite there's a growth in working age population, the job creation is still suboptimal. However, the unemployment rate is also high in South Asia and in India. It is said that as per Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, the total unemployment rate in India is 45.4%. This is one of its highest unemployment rates. However, in South Asia, if you look at the female workforce participation, it is also a very less compared to the other parts of the world. And if you look at female workforce participation in India, it is also a very less. So all these factors have been impacting the employment creation. Now, untapped benefits from the demographic dividend. So how we can benefit from the demographic dividend? First and foremost, with the demographic dividend, we can achieve higher economic growth rates. Why? Because demographic dividend essentially means that the large number of people in the working age in any country, the large number of people in the working age, that essentially means that there are less dependent people or less dependent populations. So therefore, the working age population and better employment opportunities could fuel the economic growth of any country, and that further drives the economic development also. So this is the first untapped benefit due to the demographic dividend. Next, it could also give an impetus to the employment opportunities, because higher employment seeking population, because every year the employment seeking population has been adding up to the existing workforce. And that would result in industrialization and urbanization. However, the problem is industrialization is unsustainable. So unsustainable industrialization has been taking place where it has been contaminating, polluting and degrading the existing natural resources and environment, along with urbanization which is very often becoming unplanned urbanization. After that, demographic dividend would further enhance the workforce contribution because every year it adds up to the existing workforce because new age workforce is entering into the market. Okay, so therefore working age population is rising to 65% will increase the total workforce in any economy, and swelling labor force also, and that further further factor is increasing or rise in women workforce participation. So now if you look at the composition of women workforce, women are mostly comprised of agriculture laborers, and women are also mostly confined in the agriculture sector. So that is one of the major concern, and therefore in this context we should also look at skilling women, developing entrepreneurial skills among the women. So that is also very important. And after that, we need to encourage women taking up STEM fields in education. So these are the ways through which we can enhance the women workforce participation. Now, women workforce participation is higher. That is also having a correlation with the declining fertility rates. So this is what this particular report has been saying that. However, the report has also talked about an approach so that will be useful to seize the demographic advantage. Okay, so which approach it has suggested? It has suggested to improve the existing education standards. So the report has been saying that the existing education standards are not matching with the industry requirements. So when they are not matching with the industry requirements, the workforce which is entering into the economy will not be able to find a suitable employment because there is a mismatch between the skills required by the industry and the skills possessed by the workforce. So therefore, in this context, we need to emphasize on skilling, training and providing vocational education for our youth through better education standards. Secondly, we need to take care of the healthcare sector also. So if you look at India's healthcare sector, we are spending less than 2% of our GDP in the healthcare sector. And that is where it has been creating a lot of problem in generating healthy workforce. Remember, healthy workforce is also further increases the quality of existing demographic dividend. So if you look at the developed countries, they are spending more than 6% of their GDP on the healthcare sector. But India still lags behind most of those developed countries. Now in this context, we need to enhance our spending on the healthcare sector. Not just healthcare sector, we should also look at various social aspects in this context. Provide them healthy social safety nets for the people so that enhances both quality and quantity of existing demographic dividend of our country. And secondly, we need to talk about the intersectoral collaborations. In a vast and diverse country like India, intersectoral collaborations, particularly interministerial collaborations and interdepartmental collaborations are very important. Okay, so because they can safeguard the future of adolescents. So we can safeguard the future of adolescents by better policy making, evidence-based, data-driven policy making, and because of that reason, the intersectoral collaborations are being emphasized upon. After that, we need to bridge the existing gender gaps in the workforce. We need to make women part of India's $5 trillion economy dream. So in order to do that, we need to reduce the wage gap between men and women, and we need to reduce the discrimination, or we need to prevent the discrimination of women at the workplace. So that is also important. And we need to provide equal employment opportunities for both men and women. So that is how we can integrate or make women part of India's $5 trillion economy dream. So this is what the World Bank has suggested to better utilize India's existing demographic dividend. So next article is with respect to electric vehicle policy. So recently, India has introduced the electric vehicle policy. So this electric vehicle policy says that India can import electric vehicles from any country, including China also, right? So India can import electric vehicles from any country, even from China also. So that essentially means that Chinese electric vehicle manufacturing company can import its electric vehicles to India. So this is what is provided by the electric vehicle policy by Government of India. Now, why we have been emphasizing on electric vehicles? So electric vehicles are actually an alternative for existing fossil fuel based transportation. And apart from that, it comes with no emissions or zero emissions. And secondly, it reduces the pollution in the environment and improves the health of the people. And after that, we should also talk about the international commitments with respect to the climate change mitigation and global greenhouse gases reduction. So because of all these factors, the Government of India has come up with an enabling policy for the electric vehicles. So this particular enabling policy have several provisions, and we will understand those provisions in a detailed manner. So the electric vehicle policy has mandated that any company, any foreign company wanted to import electric vehicles for sale in India, so it must invest at least $500 in the next 3 years. Okay, so that particular company must invest $500 in the next 5 years, and at the same time, so they have to start the manufacturing facilities by investing $500 million, and in these domestic manufacturing facilities they must use 25% domestically sourced components. Secondly, the government has allowed every company to import at least 8,000 vehicles per year. However, these vehicles must be above $35,000. So cost of each of these vehicle must be above 35,000 or above 35,000, so that it will not impact the domestic electric or domestic automobile industry. And in fact, it is said that it is in line with India's Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, that is fostering self-reliance and technological advancement. Now, when 25% of the components will be used in these manufacturing of electric vehicles by foreign firms which establish their manufacturing facilities in India, don't you think that over a period of time this will bring India towards self-reliance on electric vehicle manufacturing? And that is in line with government's Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. So apart from that, the policy has also outlined for domestic value addition. So the domestic value addition should be at least 50% within next 5 years. So this also ensures that the domestic component would be used in the manufacturing of foreign electric vehicles. And after that, it reduces reliance on imports. So we will no longer depend on imports. Why? Because we have been focused on developing an electric vehicle ecosystem. Gradually, we will start developing our capacities in manufacturing of electric vehicles and electric vehicle components. So that could generate a large scale employment opportunities, and it could also promote the technological innovations in our country, particularly the Indian EV sector. And that is the overall objective of the government in this respect. However, the government electric vehicle policy is also talks about the accountability provision. So the accountability actually means that any foreign company which wanted to import the electric vehicles into India, so it must provide $500 of investment within 3 years. However, the accountability clause has mandated that these $500 must be backed by bank guarantees, so that every company can invest $500 in India. Okay, so followed by that, there are certain implications, both positive implications and negative implications from this electric vehicle manufacturing policy. So firstly, it attracts a lot of global manufacturers. Now, why this attract a lot of global manufacturers? Because the government of India has actually liberalized the electric vehicle imports into India by reducing the customs duty on it. And in fact, if you look at India's total potential in terms of adopting electric vehicles, it has a large scale potential, and it also see a large scale future growth. So therefore, in this context, it could attract the global manufacturers to come and set up their domestic manufacturing capabilities in India. Okay, so this could attract all EV manufacturers globally, and at the same time this could leverage countries' expanding economy also. And after that, the government has focused on ripple effect of this particular move or this particular policy on the economy. So when I say ripple effect, the policy has also mandated 25% of domestic components must be used in those electric vehicles. And at the same time, 50% of domestic value addition also. So over a period of time, we develop our capacities with respect to manufacturing of electric vehicles, thereby standardizing or institutionalizing existing EV manufacturing infrastructure in our country. So that could create a ripple effect and fostering a network of smaller and specialized suppliers with robust and self-sustaining industrial ecosystem. So that is the overall objective of this particular policy by the government of India. So the next important article is with respect to the recent elections or the general elections that are going to take place in India, not just in India but in other countries also. So general elections, and this is the time that people must be aware of the climate change and negative consequences, and they must increase pressure on these political parties to do something which could reduce the negative effects of climate change. So the author has been saying that recently State of World Climate Report was released by World Meteorological Organization. So this State of World Global Climate Report has saying that 2023 is the one of the hottest year on record of the history, and therefore it has raised a lot of concerns with respect to alarming rise in global temperatures and its overall adverse impacts. Now in this context, how temperature increases have environmental impacts, how temperature increase or global warming will actually impact the lives on this planet. First and foremost, understand this particular report has already confirmed that 2023 is one of the hottest and warmest year on record. However, since it is the hottest and warmest year on record, it is also accompanied with numerous other challenges such as increasing sea surface temperatures. So increasing sea surface temperatures will lead to the death of coral, or it leads to the coral bleaching. Now coral bleaching will reduce or will impact the existing aquatic food web drastically, and that could reduces the species diversity or biodiversity in the aquatic ecosystems. And secondly, it could also trigger a lot of cyclones with a higher intensity. So they can create havoc across the coastal areas. That is increasing ocean temperatures. So followed by that, the glacial retreat increases the sea surface temperatures, thereby flooding or submerging the coastal areas also. And secondly, diminishing of Antarctic ice cover is also a concern because of it contributes to the increasing sea surface temperatures, and it also increases the stress on existing freshwater resources. However, the rising sea levels and increased frequency of extreme weather events. Now, not just rising sea levels but sea surface temperatures are very often contributing for the heat waves, torrential rains, tropical cyclones, increasing frequency and their intensity. So all these factors have been underscoring the severity of climate change impacts. However, we need to understand the larger socio-economic impact of the climate change on different population groups, especially on the unorganized sector and agriculture sector, because they are more vulnerable. Now, climate change and global warming will have detrimental and disproportionate impact on the vulnerable categories who have dependent on agriculture and informal labor. Now, in this context, the author has been saying that we are in an election season, and that provides an opportunity for us to raise this issue of climate change, thereby increasing the pressure on political parties and the governments to do something that could reduce the negative impacts of climate change and also undertake adaptation and mitigation efforts. Now, in this context, across the world, there will be elections. So, and this is considered as an election season across different democracies. So therefore, in this context, the World Meteorological Organization's report can be considered as a catalyst to initiate discussions on climate change. And after that, we need to enhance the public awareness with respect to climate change. Political parties have the opportunity to commit themselves enhancing public awareness on climate change, outlining the concrete steps to mitigate the global warming. So after that, we should also talk about India's pursuit for the global leadership, and at the same time, India's economic prosperity are actually dependent on mitigation and adaptation of climate change. So therefore, the author has been suggesting that we need to incorporate these climate action plans into the political parties' agenda so that we can do something on this front. Okay, so this is what the author has been suggesting with respect to the climate change and the elections that are going to take place. Okay, so that's all in this lecture. So please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.